The first American flag was raised atop Mount Suribachi after 36 days of fighting on the island of Iwo Jima. For a year, the Japanese had been reinforcing the island with tunnels carved into the mountainside with hidden artillery positions and a network of reinforced bunkers. However, Allied bombings and naval barrages had finally broken through, allowing the Marines to take control of the southern tip of the island as part of its island-hopping strategy to defeat Japan. In fact, Iwo Jima hadn't even originally been a target, but there was a lull in the build-up to the planned invasion of Okinawa. In the following months, the capture of Iwo Jima meant the weakening of Japanese early warning system, and it would be used by the U.S. as an emergency landing strip for damaged bombers. At 10:20 a.m. on February 23, 1945, after the raising of the first flag, gunfire erupted from the Japanese soldiers who saw the flag as just a new target atop the island's highest peak. Marine Staff Sergeant Louis Lowry of Leatherneck magazine was there that day, photographing the siege and the first flag being raised. He had to dive for cover when the enemy started shooting, breaking his camera in the process. After the fighting had settled, Lowry began to head down the hill to get new gear. On his way, he met other photographers on their way up to Suribachi. After being informed they had missed the raising of the flag, the men headed up the mount, considered turning around, but photographer Joe Rosenthal was told by Lowry that the vantage point from the top was worth the trip. So it was decided to continue on to the peak. The raising of the first flag was cause for great jubilation for the Marines. The men were cheering and the ships out in the bay were blowing their horns. However, Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal believed the flag to be too small and not able to be seen from far away. The commander of the 2nd Battalion, Chandler Johnson, believed the second flag being planted should be from their team and commanded Lieutenant Albert Tuttle to find a larger flag from USS LST-779. This second flag raising would be the iconic image captured by AP photographer Joe Rosenthal. By the time Rosenthal reached the top of the mountain, the first flag was still in place. With his Graflex Speed Graphics 4x10 camera, a common camera for the press, he did what any good photographer would do and waited around for his moment. The Marines began attaching the new, larger flag to an old Japanese water pipe. Rosenthal had his camera already set to 1/400th of a second shutter speed and an f-stop between f8 and f11. As he began piling up rocks to stand on for a better viewpoint, he nearly missed his important shot. To his side, Marine Sergeant William Genost was filming the moment and asked Rosenthal if he was in his way. When he looked up to Genost, he could see out of the corner of his eye that he was about to miss the shot. Rosenthal quickly turned around and snapped the photograph without even looking through the viewfinder. He would later tell Collier's magazine, "I swung my camera and shot the scene. That is how the picture was taken. And when you take a picture like that, you don't come away saying you got the shot. You don't know." Unsure of the quality of this photo, he decided to pose the men by the flag in what he called his gung-ho shot, thinking he'd have to have something decent to send back to the AP. Rosenthal tried looking for the men in his original flag-raising shot, but they had dispersed, and after a while, Rosenthal gave up. However, it would later be revealed the men in the shot were, from right to left, Harlan Block, Harold Keller, Franklin Sousley, Michael Strank, Harold Schultz, and Ira Hayes. Strank and Block would be killed 6 days after the flag raising, while Sousley would later be shot by sniper fire a few days before the island was declared secure. Having his shots, Rosenthal headed back down the mountain, passing men carrying ammunition, supplies, food, and rations for the complete occupation of the stronghold, and handed off the film to be sent to Guam for developing. Upon wire transfer, the Associated Press editor John Bodkin exclaimed, "Here's one for all time," and immediately transmitted it to New York. It was quickly picked up off the wire by hundreds of newspapers and magazines. This was 17 hours after the photo was taken, a remarkable turnaround for back in those days. But after the photo got out, some claimed there wasn't something quite right about it. It looked staged. Back in Guam, Rosenthal was asked whether his photo was staged. Thinking they were talking about his gung-ho shot, he simply said, "Sure." This misunderstanding created quite the controversy. For years, Rosenthal fought off claims that the event was a recreation. Despite the whole moment being filmed by Knaus, word began to spread that this iconic photo was a staged event, and it would continue that way for years. Even with these accusations, Rosenthal won the Pulitzer Prize for photography the very same year it was taken in 1945. F.A. Resch, the AP's executive news photo editor, submitted it for consideration of the prize. However, the photography jury was just finishing its work and apparently didn't consider it. Resch wrote them, "We felt the material was so outstanding that it merited consideration accordingly." They agreed, and now perhaps no other Pulitzer Prize-winning photograph is better known than Joe Rosenthal's picture of 6 U.S. Marines raising the American flag on Mount Suribachi on Iwo Jima. The photo became a centerpiece of a war bond poster campaign, helping bring in $26 billion for the war effort. Before the war had even ended, the image appeared on a U.S. postage stamp. Then, 9 years later, it became the model for the Marine Corps War Memorial in Arlington, Virginia. Rosenthal's name would appear on that memorial along with the men involved and the sculptor's credit. Quote, "I took the photo, the Marines took Iwo Jima," Rosenthal would say. An amazing run for a photographer that was initially rejected by the U.S. Army for having poor eyesight. But he would eventually join the Marines as a photographer documenting life aboard ships. Then in 1996, just 10 years before his death due to natural causes, Joe Rosenthal would be recognized as an honorary Marine.